They kicked me out on my graduation night and said I'd never amount to anything. I can still feel the sting of that sentence sharp enough to split the person I was from the woman I'd have to become. I left with a suitcase, a soaked gown, and a promise to myself, survive, first rise later. 11 years later, I walked into my sister's wedding. The room froze. Her husband stared at me and asked, "You two know each other?" I smiled. Too well. But the real surprise wasn't his question. It was the way my family reacted, like I'd returned holding something they desperately didn't want exposed. Most people talk about childhood like it's a warm place they can walk back into whenever life gets hard. Mine was more like a hallway, narrow, echoing, and lined with doors that only opened for my younger sister, Grace. If you've ever grown up as the responsible one, you know the script. I learned early that being quiet kept the peace, that stepping aside kept the household running, and that love in our home came with conditions printed so small you didn't notice until you failed one. My father, Rowan, ran a family clinic in the city. He carried himself like every opinion he had was a medical fact. My mother, Elaine, mirrored him, repeating his beliefs as if they were gospel. And Grace learned quickly that being the favorite was a full-time position. She played the part beautifully, soft voice, wide eyes, a talent for looking helpless at exactly the right moment. I remember watching them from the hallway when I was a teenager, my father leaning over her homework, my mother fussing with her hair before piano recitals. I'd stand there with my backpack still on, holding straight-A report cards they never asked to see. You tell yourself you don't care. You tell yourself it doesn't matter. But cracks form quietly long before anything breaks. Even then, I worked. After school shifts, weekend jobs, I saved everything, counting it in a little tin box under my bed, my way out, my future. When my acceptance letter arrived, I cried in the parking lot behind the grocery store where I stocked shelves. Grace got balloons, cake, a family dinner. I told myself it was fine. I told myself fairness was a luxury some of us just didn't get. Evan came into my life years later, when I was working the night desk at a hospital and studying between patient charts. He was a resident, then sharp kind, always noticing when I hadn't eaten or when I'd fallen asleep on my notes. He didn't ask about my family at first, maybe sensing that the truth lived behind a locked door. Liam came after that, a miracle wrapped in laughter and sticky fingers, a reminder that I could build something better than what I came from. For a long time, I avoided anything that carried the Hart name. Family photos, holiday gatherings, even the city block where their clinic sat. But the wedding invitation changed everything, not because I wanted to see them again, but because the envelope held a weight I couldn't name. And deep down, I knew walking into that ballroom would mean opening a door I'd kept shut for more than a decade. 11 years later, I walked into my sister's wedding. If the past had a temperature, the ballroom felt exactly like it. Too bright, too polished, too eager to pretend nothing had ever happened. Chandeliers threw gold onto marble floors, and guests in elegant suits drifted like they were part of a scene staged for a magazine spread. I stood at the entrance for a moment, smoothing the front of my dress, steadying my breath. Evan rested a reassuring hand on the small of my back, and Liam clutched my fingers, craning his neck to see the towering cake across the room. "Mom, do we know anyone here?" he whispered. "Only ghosts," I thought. We stepped forward and conversations didn't stop, but they shifted softly like curtains catching a draft. Faces turned, eyes widened. It was subtle, but I felt it. Recognition spreading in tiny waves. A few doctors paused mid-sentence when they spotted my name on the place cards near the entrance. I was used to that reaction in professional settings, but not here at a wedding where my own family had once sworn I'd never be more than a failure. Grace appeared first. She turned toward me with the exact expression I remembered from childhood, surprise melting into calculation, calculation hardening into panic. Her white gown shimmered under the lights, but her shoulders tensed, and the smile she tried to form wobbled like a poorly tied ribbon. "Adeline," she breathed, as if saying my name might summon a reckoning she wasn't ready to face. Behind her, my parents froze. Rowan's jaw clenched, and Elaine's hand flew to her necklace, a gesture she always used when caught off guard, as though clutching pearls could rewrite history. Why are you here?" my mother whispered. I lifted the invitation slightly. I was invited. Before they could respond, movement stirred beside Grace. A man stepped forward, broad-shouldered, polished the kind of poised confidence that comes from years of medical training. Daniel, her husband. The groom. He studied me with the analytical calm of someone trained to read people in seconds. His eyes flicked from my face to the small name badge clipped to my clutch, and something sharpened in his expression. "You two know each other?" he asked, glancing between me and the family who suddenly looked like they were standing on cracking ice. The question struck a silent chord through the room. Grace went stiff. My parents blanched. Guests nearby slowed their steps. The air tightened, waiting. I felt the old ache tug at my ribs, the memory of rain, the slam of a door, the words that carved themselves into me the night they drove me out. But beneath that ache was something steadier, stronger, the woman I'd become. I smiled. Too well. Daniel blinked, confused, and in that tiny hesitation I saw the first thread unravel. Grace's fingers knotted in the fabric of her gown. My mother's lips parted like she wanted to intervene but had no script prepared for this moment. Evan leaned closer. "You okay?" he murmured. "I'm fine," I said, and for the first time in a long time it was true. Because I could feel something shifting, not loud, not chaotic, but quiet and inevitable, like pressure building beneath glass. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Grace tried to recover first. She let out a shaky laugh, the kind she used to give teachers when she hadn't read the assigned chapters. "We just haven't seen each other in ages," she said, reaching for Daniel's arm like she needed an anchor. Daniel didn't lean into her touch. Instead, he kept studying me with the kind of curiosity that made Grace visibly uneasy. "Your last name is Hart," he said thoughtfully. "So is hers. But she never mentioned—" "She doesn't like talking about the past," my mother cut in sharply. "Today is a happy day. Let's focus on that." But her voice trembled and Daniel noticed. He turned to Grace again, slower this time, more deliberate. "Why didn't you tell me you had an older sister?" Grace opened her mouth, closed. It opened it again. It just never came up. The weak answer hung between them like smoke. Evan squeezed my hand. A few nearby guests stopped pretending not to listen. I didn't need revenge. The truth was doing the work for me. A server passed with a tray of champagne. I picked up a glass, letting the cold stem settle into my fingers while I watched the three of them, my sister, my mother, my father, shuffle under the weight of a story they had spent over a decade trying to bury. Rowan finally stepped forward. "Adeline," he said in a low voice meant only for me, but too brittle to stay contained. "I don't know what you're trying to do, but this isn't the place." That old instinct, the one that used to make me shrink, apologize, fold myself. Smaller flickered for a moment, then died. "I'm not trying to do anything," I said. "I'm simply attending the wedding I was invited to." For a second, he looked like he might explode. Then he caught Daniel watching him recalibrated and forced a smile so tight it looked painful. "Let's all take a breath," Daniel said carefully. "I'm just surprised. Grace told me she handled the family clinic alone for years, that her parents depended on her, that she was the only one who stayed." My eyebrows lifted a fraction. "Is that what she said?" Grace paled. The room seemed to shift around us, tiny changes in posture, glances exchanged, whispers forming. Evan's practiced calm beside me became a grounding force. Liam tugged my dress. "Mom, can I get cake yet?" "Soon," I whispered. Grace stepped closer, her voice lowered to a hiss only I could hear. "Why are you doing this? Why show up now?" "I didn't know I needed your permission," I replied. Her eyes pooled with panic, not guilt panic. The kind a person feels when the facade is slipping and there's nothing left to hold on to. Moments later, she disappeared into the hallway, heels clicking too fast for a bride. Elaine followed. Rowan lingered, glaring at me like I had reached out and snapped the life he'd constructed for Grace. But all I had done was walk in the door. Evan nudged me gently. "She's unraveling," he murmured. "No," I said softly. "She's revealing." And when I finally followed her to the restroom hallway, I knew something had shifted inside me. I wasn't that drenched 18-year-old anymore begging to be believed. I was the one they should have feared losing. I found Grace in the restroom hallway gripping the marble counter as if the room were tilting. Her reflection looked brittle, eyes too wide, breath too fast, the kind of panic you can't hide behind makeup or pearls. When she saw me, her shoulders snapped back. "You had no right to come here," she whispered, voice fraying at the edges. "I was invited," I said, "by your husband." Her jaw tightened. "Daniel doesn't know everything." I'm starting to realize that I replied. For a moment, neither of us moved. The music from the ballroom drifted in soft, romantic, painfully out of place. Grace finally spat out, "Why now? Why today? You couldn't let me have this one moment. I didn't come to ruin anything," I said quietly. "I just showed up. The rest, that's yours." Her eyes flashed, but beneath the anger was something rawer fear. "He can't find out," she whispered. "You don't understand. I understand perfectly." She flinched, because I did understand. I understood the years of lies, the story she told everyone that I'd dropped out, that I was unstable, that she carried the family's burdens alone, all while living off the opportunities bought with my stolen future. "Grace," I said, "you can't build a life on a version of me that never existed." She grabbed my arm. "Please, don't say anything else out there." I removed her hand gently. I haven't said a word. And that was the part that terrified her most. When we returned to the ballroom, the atmosphere had shifted. Conversations faltered when we passed. My parents stood near the head table, whispering urgently to Daniel, who looked increasingly troubled. Evan walked toward me, Liam perched on his hip. "People are asking questions," he murmured. "Let them," I said. We returned to our table just in time to hear a doctor from one of the major hospitals greet Daniel warmly, then turn to Grace. "You worked at your family's clinic for how many years again?" Grace straightened, forcing a bright smile. "Oh, I've been managing everything since college." The doctor nodded politely. "And where did you study again? I remember Daniel mentioning Stanford." Grace cut in quickly. "I completed a specialized track." The doctor paused. "Really? I collaborated with faculty there for 5 years. I don't remember that program." Daniel stiffened beside her. I felt the moment the thread snapped. He turned to her slowly. "Grace, which professors supervised your program?" Grace's lips parted soundlessly. Rowan jumped in. "This is ridiculous. Today is supposed to be about joy." Elaine placed a trembling hand on his arm. "Let's not do this here." But Daniel was no longer listening to them. His attention was locked on his bride. "You lied," he murmured. "Did you ever even attend Stanford?" Grace's breath hitched. The room fell into a hush so absolute it felt like gravity shifted. I didn't step forward. I didn't interrupt. I simply watched the same way a witness watches a building sway before it collapses under its own faulty beams. Daniel exhaled sharply. "Grace, who is she really?" He nodded toward me. "You said she was unstable. You said she cut the family off. You said I had to—" Grace broke in the words, tumbling out. "If I didn't, they would have looked at her, not me." "You don't know what it was like." Her voice cracked, and suddenly she wasn't angry anymore. She was unraveling. "She's always been smarter," Grace whispered. "Always. Everyone favored her. Favored me," I repeated softly. "Grace, they threw me out." There it was. The truth she'd never wanted acknowledged. Not publicly, not with witnesses who would remember. Rowan stormed forward. "Enough. You will not take attention from your sister's day." I met his glare calmly. "I'm not the one taking attention." Daniel faced him. "Is it true? Did you kick her out on graduation night?" Rowan's nostrils flared. "She was ungrateful. She refused to help at the clinic. That's not what you told me," Daniel said quietly. "You said she left because she couldn't handle responsibility." Grace squeezed her eyes shut. I felt my own pulse steady. This wasn't revenge. It was revelation. "In fact, Daniel continued, the records from your clinic don't align with what Grace has told me. I saw her name listed only as a receptionist. Nothing more." Elaine paled. Rowan took a shaky step back. And just like that, the structure they'd built, the narrative they'd depended on for 11 years began to crumble. Daniel turned to me. "And your name appears on the early administrative systems, training logs, billing correspondence. Why would she be listed there?" I held his gaze. "Because I used to help run the place." Grace's breath caught. "I didn't think you'd remember those. I remember everything I said." There was no anger in my voice, only truth, and that truth drew every eye in the room. Daniel looked devastated. "Why would you hide this from me?" Tears spilled down Grace's cheeks. "I didn't want to lose you. You lost me the moment you lied," he said. He stepped away from her just a few inches, but enough that everyone saw. A tremor of whispers rippled around the room. Liam tugged my hand. "Mom, are you mad at that lady?" I knelt. "No, buddy, just sad," he nodded solemnly. "People shouldn't lie." Daniel approached me slowly. "Adeline," he said, his voice low but steady, "how much of what they told me about you was false?" "Most of it," I answered. Rowan lunged forward. "Don't listen to this." He didn't finish. A man from the investigator's office had stepped into the ballroom, one of the quiet figures who'd been tracking the financial inconsistencies I'd reported months earlier, without malice, without commentary, just facts. The sight of him made Rowan go rigid. Elaine swayed. Grace let out a small, broken sound. I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't smile. Justice doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it walks in the door and simply stands there long enough for the guilty to recognize themselves. Rowan swallowed hard. "This is a private event." The investigator spoke calmly. "I won't disrupt the reception. I'm here only to deliver documents regarding the clinic's billing practices. They should be reviewed promptly." He held out the envelope. No one reached for it. Finally, I did. Not to claim it, just to hand it back to Rowan. "You should open this," I said softly. The room was so quiet I could hear the fragile tremor of paper as he took it. Evan stepped beside me, his presence warm and grounding. Liam leaned into my legs, sensing tension, but not quite understanding it. Daniel looked at me with something like respect softened by regret, sharpened by truth. And Grace? She sank into a chair, her gown pooling around her like a fallen curtain, hands shaking as she stared at the life she'd built on borrowed pieces. I didn't feel victory. I felt release. Daniel exhaled once more. "You two know each other," he whispered again, the same words as earlier, but laden with a very different meaning. I smiled gently. Too well. And this time the room understood exactly what that meant. The wedding ended in a silence no music could repair. Guests drifted out with hushed voices, casting glances that held equal parts sympathy and disbelief. Evan drove us home, his hand resting over mine, grounding me in a way my childhood never had. Liam fell asleep in the back seat, his small breath steady and untroubled. By the next morning, the clinic investigation had escalated. I didn't push it forward. I simply responded to the request for old records, nothing more than the truth they had once forced me to carry alone. The consequences belonged to them. A week later, Daniel reached out not for drama, but closure. He apologized for believing the version of me he'd been fed. I accepted, not because he deserved it, but because I no longer needed anything from the past. Life settled into something gentler. My office felt lighter, my garden brighter. Evan and Liam spent weekends building model rockets on the patio while I reviewed proposals for a scholarship fund, one created for students who, like me, had no safety net. I didn't forgive my family. I didn't hate them either. I simply let them become what they'd always been, a chapter I had already outgrown. Sometimes justice isn't loud. It's the quiet certainty that you walked away whole while the truth finally caught up to the people who tried to break you. I built a life they can't touch, a family they can't rewrite, and a future that belongs only to us. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts below. And don't forget to subscribe for more real, soul-deep family stories.